Welcome to another AlohaABA Ethics Munch, where you will join myself, Meg Jones. I am a BCBA and a Customer Success Manager at AlohaABA, and one of our favorite customers, Sarah Ellenwine. Sarah, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Sarah Ellenwine. I'm a BCBA, owner of the company Set Therapy ABA, and I have a YouTube channel called Your ABA Health.
Okay, and when you join us for one of our ethics munches, we will present an ethical issue and we will discuss it amongst ourselves, go over the ethical codes that it entails, and also talk about some ethical questions and solutions. For this, you will receive 2 secret code numbers, and you will also fill out a form providing any feedback as well as those secret codes, and that will give you a free half CEU for ethics. We have a bunch of these on our website, so I encourage you to check them all out. And here we go. So today we will be reviewing the vignette as well as the ethical concerns. We will look over the ethical codes that we address and consider some ethical questions before we wrap up for the day. Sarah, can you introduce our vignette for us today?
Yes, so we have Nick. He's a 4-year-old boy who receives services at a daycare from an ABA organization. Both of the RBTs who staff Nick's daycare hours have relayed concerns of daycare staff being rude and unwilling to assist with necessary tasks related to caring for Nick, such as toiling and ensuring the safety while day is being summarized. At the end of session, Nick engages in high rates of elopement. Both of the instructors have also voiced concerns that the daycare staff say that Nick cannot play with toys because he engages in high rates of mouthing, and that the RBTs need to provide toys specifically and only for him. One RBT has also relayed that the daycare staff have explicitly told her that anything related to Nick is quote unquote her problem, and that she cannot use her time with him for other duties such as data collection.
This sounds like a fun environment to be working in for RBTs and poor Nick. All right, so our first secret code number is going to be the number 41. Make sure to write this down, and you'll be asked to enter that when you fill out your form. Okay, so looking at the ethical concerns here, it seems to me that we need to really identify the stakeholders. Obviously, the parent is a stakeholder, whoever the funder is a stakeholder, but if the majority of sessions are being provided in the daycare, they're also stakeholders.
Yeah.
And so it sounds to me like we might need to have a meeting. And the RBTs need to be operating within a defined role. I think I've run into this a lot, especially when we're providing services somewhere other than the home, where the parent has signed a services agreement as to what the goals are and that their parent participation goals are. It seems to me that sometimes we run into a situation where we have other caregivers who view us or view the RBTs as more of caregivers rather than RBTs.
Yeah, especially in a daycare setting because they need those needs met. So I can understand why the daycare staff might rely on the RBTs to meet those needs, because why can't they, from their perspective?
They have an extra adult here. They have an extra adult who knows Nick really well, so they should be the one taking care of him. They don't see this as a training opportunity for them to work with Nick. They see this as an extra grown-up here who is only there to focus on Nick. And so really clearly defining that role. Looking at those conditions interfering with service facility and that defined role, one of the red flags that jumped out to me was the toileting. Personally, unless somebody is specifically trained or this is specifically agreed upon, it is not an RBT's role or a BCBA's role to be handling toileting on their own. We are not wiping bottoms. We are not changing diapers. We are there to assist someone else in implementing a toileting goal or a toileting program, but not
when you have the resources of a daycare staff, doing those tasks. I'm always big on, we don't want the other adults become dependent on our care, so dependent on Nick only tolerating changes with us. So we're here to teach the staff and teach Nick how to survive in this environment and build a space that's safe for him. But doing it all for everybody isn't going to be helpful.
Well, and it's also, there's a liability issue in that, you know, if the toilet or the bathroom is in a different room, it's behind a closed door, that sets our staff up for possible legal safety issues. You know, it is our role to be there to assist the caregivers in implementing skills and training. It is not our role to be behind a closed door with a bottomless child alone and potentially changing their diaper or cleaning up poop or pee that has fallen on the floor. That is not legally what our staff's role is.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to define. The other kind of conditions that I think are interfering with the service facility is that Nick is being very isolated. One of the great perks of getting to provide services in daycare is you can create social goals and you always have peers around.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, and
it
like
sounds
my primary concern when I hear this conversation too is what the staff are saying. I hope not in front of Nick. I hope not in front of other kids.
yeah,
But their language sounds really harsh and very burned out. You know, who knows what they were working with before the RBTs were able to arrive and help. So it makes me nervous too, even if he's being isolated from peers, also from the other adults and being treated differently is really concerning as well.
absolutely. That he is, even if he is allowed to play with the other kids, apparently he's not allowed to touch any of the toys. You know, like, how is he supposed to play with peers? How is he supposed to form a relationship with the school staff so that eventually we can fade our services? That's the goal. The best and worst day of our job is when our kids and the caregivers don't need us anymore. And if we're sitting in a situation where Nick is only being dealt with by the RBTs, the other school staff aren't talking to him, the other kids aren't playing with him, he's not allowed to touch anything that we don't bring, that's not setting ourselves up to eventually fade services ever.
And like ethically, we should be kind of bulldozing our way in here to stand up for Nick because clearly he's not being treated equally like his peers, and he, you know, has these behaviors of concern that are causing isolation and things, but they're not his fault. So the BCBA or company owner, whatever perspective I'm coming in, even as RBT, that's my primary concern. Ethically, first and foremost, is Nick safe, happy, comfortable, welcomed in this environment?
Yeah. And I think like one of my biggest things that I would then be shooting for is figuring out, okay, sounds like the mouthing is a real issue. So maybe that's our assessment and behavior change intervention number one. Let's reduce mouthing first, because that's the most important thing to the stakeholders. Let's get on a toileting schedule first so that we can start to have him toileting independently. He's 4. You know, probably a lot of the other kids in the room are either toileting on a schedule or toileting independently. So how can we get him caught up on these things that are most important to these stakeholders quickly?
Yeah, really identifying those primary goals and then making sure parents are looped in on this conversation. How do they feel? So I know there's some parents that would be ready to pull their kid out so fast if they heard this was happening, and they deserve to know. So, you know, do they want to work through these goals and try to work with this daycare? You know, who knows what barriers are in place there, but is that a goal for parents, looping them in and having everybody as a team? Hopefully we can collaborate and really talk about what's going on and get on the same page and see where all this frustration is coming from.
Sounds like it's time for a meeting outside of session hours
Immediately.
between
Yeah.
daycare staff, mom, and the BCBA to figure out what can we do? Because you're right, maybe this is just not the right daycare. Maybe we need to go to it sucks to have to move daycares, but maybe they need to go to somewhere else that is going to be more inclusive.
Yeah, maybe a developmental preschool might be more appropriate. Things where, you know, Nick is able to be in an environment where he can be supported and be around adults who can support him. And then also have the space to work in those goals and things. It's just going to be so important before we even consider the next layer of ethics on this.
Absolutely. And I think the final big concern that we're seeing is, you know, our RBTs are being told they can't collect data because they don't have that time to do that summary because they're supposed to be watching Nick. And that is something that is somewhat inappropriate. Like they do need that time to write a summary at the end of session. Maybe it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever they need. They do need that time where someone else can take him for a few minutes. And there are safety concerns with that.
Yeah, so maybe coming in and kind of setting those conversations up where once 5 o'clock hits, this RBT is done, they're walking away, and having the RBT do their notes, their session notes outside of the daycare location, considering those options. And then if it's issues where the RBT is struggling to take data during the session and the daycare staff were feeling like the RBT can't do their job, this is definitely where BCBA needs to come in and supervise and determine all the reasons support's needed.
Yeah. And I think that's one of those times, kind of what we talked about before, where maybe we need to pare down our goals a little bit. Maybe we're only working on a couple of things at a time so that we do have time to take the data, so that we do have time to address the most important concerns of the stakeholders. I've made that mistake before where you come in guns blazing with all these ideas. And we used to have a saying that I used to have was, we'll worry about that later. We have a later list, right? Of the goals and the skills that are on our list, but they're going to be addressed at a later time. Right now, we're only working on these things.
Yeah. Maybe talking to the daycare staff and showing them, like, look, we see your concerns, like elopement. Let's say he's running out of the daycare, like, yeah, that's huge. And then, feeling like we're all on the same page of we're all concerned, because maybe they've tried so much with Nick and they're just coming from a place where they just feel hopeless. So just coming and trying to be that support and that communication and, have your RBTs backed up in that way. Like, they are here to save the day, but you still have to do your daycare role and we will do our role. And we're going to meet these 3 goals you guys want met. Let's do it.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about helping them feel involved, because I think right now they're not. They're saying, okay, that person, Jennifer is here to deal with Nick, and so I don't have to worry about that anymore. And for us to come in and say, okay, Nick is a student at this daycare. If you had, I always say it's a wish list. If you had a wish of 3 wishes,
magic wand is mine,
that we could just, Nick would no longer do this, or Nick would magically do this. What are those 3 things that we would do tomorrow? And okay, great. Someone just wrote your first 3 goals for you, and let's just worry about those things.
Working together. And then also in that meeting that you're having that you called immediately and everybody came to and it's going great, asking why do they feel like he needs to be isolated with mouthing? Like, obviously they work around little kids, so they're used to this behavior. Is it, maybe an illness concern? Are they worried for Nick's safety and health? Like, coming in and just making these assumptions, I think, is such a huge part of ethics, is asking those questions and really getting down to the core, the truth, and dealing with the facts of the situation rather than assuming the daycare staff are, not nice or they're inconsiderate, and letting them know that we're here to work with them.
Maybe it's a simple having some sort of antiseptic wipe or hand sanitizer that we can kind of give things a wipe after he plays with them.
A mouthing bin they put the toys into.
We'll clean them later. Or someone will clean them later.
We'll do our best, daycare staff.
We're trying here. We're trying to help. All right. So there's a lot of different ethical codes that are in place. That first one is practicing within that defined role. We are RBTs. We are engaging in behavior analytics support and services. We are not a caregiver. Making it clear in those services agreements that we provide. A lot of times we only provide a service agreement to the parents, even though that might not be where the services are taking place, and making sure it's very clear to the stakeholders and the people who are involved in the services, what is our role? They might not know. They might not know that we don't do diapers. They thought that this person is coming in and they're like, great, that person's in charge of Nick. I don't have to worry about any of his stuff anymore because that girl is here and she is in charge of doing all of his things. And
who can blame them? If you don't know, that's what it looks like, because they're one-on-one with him.
If they didn't know, and then this one-to-one comes in here and says, oh yeah, no, I don't do diapers. And
it might appear snooty to them,
that might be
I changed diapers, why can't you?
Yeah, why are you here? So yeah,
Mhm.
knowing who those clients and stakeholders are, and then doing those assessments and those behavior change interventions that are evidence-based, having them make that wish list so that we can select the assessments and the interventions that need to be done to accomplish that wish list as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
It sounds like what we need is some buy-in.
Yeah,
And
I
so
completely agree.
if we can work on something that's really important to them, and they can say, wow, 2 months ago he was mouthing everything, and now we hardly see that mouthing at all anymore. They
Mhm.
know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got this other thing that he does. He makes this really high-pitched sound and it's driving me crazy. Can we work on that? Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I
It's
feel
a
like this is where the BCBAs can be so crucial. They're going to be that bridge. Because also, I'm sure that RBTs are feeling the things that Nick might be feeling, where the staff are starting to isolate them and push them away. They're frustrated. So having those bridges and maybe even have the RBTs involved in one of these meetings, just to come together of we're going to do this.
exactly. We do have that responsibility to our clients. We have that responsibility to try to integrate them into their environment.
Yeah.
It's very tempting for the RBTs to just not fight it and say, okay, yeah, we'll just play over here, but you're doing your client a disservice at that point. You're isolating them as well by agreeing to these things. And I think that's really important.
Yeah,
Um,
they deserve
and then having that services agreement, having an agreement, this is something that
Yeah.
we probably should have done with the staff, daycare staff before we got started, but it's never too late. It's never too late
Yeah.
to have a sit down and define expectations.
Mhm.
We are, obviously we need to document our professional activities, collect and use that data. So the answer of it's fine, we just won't take data. We'll just watch them the whole time. That's not ethical. It's not correct. We can't do that. We are obligated to do that, and we're obligated to give our staff time to do that.
So
And
I find
should
that like just showing them the data that we have and like them
Mhm.
seeing behind the scenes helps a lot. Cause I mean, if they don't know anything about what we're doing and why we're doing it, just showing them the graph, like this is what the RBT is doing the entire
Mhm.
time. Isn't this so cool? Helps a
Yeah.
ton.
And even if we have a really cool graph showing like, look at how much more he's requesting
Mhm.
than he was when we first started. We've seen this all go up, and being able to say, and that's because of you. See how much more he's requesting with you versus
Mhm.
requesting with us. That's pretty amazing. Look at how great
Mhm.
you're doing, you wonderful
Yeah.
staff member. Um, and then if the worst should happen, how do we discontinue? If this is
Yeah.
continuing to be a harsh workplace for our RBTs, if they're not able to work with on this,
Yeah.
how do we discontinue, or how can we help transition to something else? Because we've done all these amazing things, I hope they would work, but sometimes that doesn't work.
Yeah, involving parents in this conversation because ultimately the stakeholders at the daycare involved, parents are involved in making those decisions for their child's involving in what they think is appropriate. Documentation is going to be so crucial for this. You've got to document everything, have the RBTs document the barriers to service every day. You can even add to your session note or even like a note at the bottom if you're just a BCBA of like, what were the barriers to service today? Why is, what is the daycare saying? What's going on? And being able to share that with parents, I think would be crucial part of looking to discontinue services if they're continuing to struggle to accept NIC or to accept the RBTs.
It's really important to start getting your ducks in a row
Yeah.
when you are going to discontinue services so it doesn't come suddenly. Saying to the parent, okay, this is what we've been experiencing. These are the things that have been said. And, sometimes the parents will say to you, well, I don't have anybody else. Or
Yeah.
this is my cousin's daycare. And so I'm getting a really good deal. So he has to stay here.
Yeah.
This is the only choice. This is what we're doing. And saying, if this is the only choice, we're not going to be able to continue here. Or here are some alternatives of different, not just saying, you need to change daycares of like, hey, we have another client at this daycare a couple miles away. We've had a great experience with them. Would you be willing to go over here? Not making it all or nothing. But really still putting our foot down into this is what we can offer.
Yeah, I feel like ethically, this is a really good example of kind of that like step ladder or that trickle down effect you need to consider. So the highest priority, the lowest priority in ethics, it's never clean cut, black and white. This is what you do. So you have to kind of work with your way down. So starting at, your highest ethical obligation, Nick, is he safe? Is he happy? Like we talked about earlier, and just working your way down. And at the end of the day, if you are unable to ethically do your job, RBTs are unable to do it. There's all these barriers in place and it's just not working, making that hard decision. And like I said, offering those alternatives, maybe even in home instead, on the weekend, stuff like that.
Yeah. So something that is, look, I know we mentioned talking about maybe there's a developmental preschool somewhere. Maybe there's, an aunt or a grandma who could be home 2 days a week, and we could do services at home a couple days a week and slowly start to transition to something else. There's so many solutions here, and just no one being too rigid, I think, is the important
Also,
thing
if it
here.
gets to this point, considering talking to the daycare staff's supervisors, because if this behavior is happening, is wildly inappropriate. If they're isolating, they're continuing to make the RBTs feel like they can't do their jobs, unsafe, and all those things. Maybe consider bringing this up to the owners of the daycare, their supervisors, to kind of discuss like, this is what's happening. Here's what we're considering doing, and this isn't what we want to do. Is there another teacher, daycare room option here as well?
Yeah.
It's a hard conversation to have for sure.
It is definitely a hard conversation. And I think, at the end of the day, I don't know how much money Nick's mom is paying to this daycare, but they're not going to want to lose that income, especially when that income comes with an extra adult that they're not having to pay for. That's a pretty good deal for them. So trying to figure out kind of what are the compromises that we can offer. And I think as we get into the ethical questions, we can start talking about like, what are the compromises that we can, what are the things that we as an organization are willing to bend on, and what are the things that we're not? Before we move on to those ethical questions, your second code is 89. Okay, so looking at what could we have done before starting services to prevent this situation?
Yeah, so education, maybe considering what they've been dealing with prior, are they overwhelmed, and seeing, do they understand what an RBT is? Do they understand what you're going to come in and do? Have they met with the BCBA? What are, parents' perspectives? Again, that meeting, just that prior communication, whether it's written or in person, educating on what autism is, whatever it needs to be, just coming in, assuming that your education is needed.
Yeah, I think coming in, I'm sure most organizations have a services agreement that they give to parents, but do they have a services agreement that they give to either the teachers or a community staff, camp staff, all of these things? People who haven't ever met a child with autism before don't really know what they're getting into. It's all these people may have been told is, Nick's going to start coming here and he comes with his own adult, so you don't have to do anything for him. That this may be their understanding.
Exactly.
So having a clear agreement, having a meeting even before services start, I would recommend having a meeting with the parent, with the daycare staff, with the daycare owner of, these are the expectations. This is what we can do. This is what we can't do. Again, they may not know that we can't do diapers. They may not know that we are not supposed to be in a closed door with a child. A lot of them don't know that. And a lot of kids who may or may not, even if they had a kid who had a shadow before, their company policies might have been different than ours. It might have been a not behavior analytic organization.
Maybe making like a who we are, what we do kind of cheat sheet that you can just hand out like a paper to reference and be like, these are the quick things you need to know about us and what we're going to do and how we collect data and like what we need. And, then asking like how we can support you as well. You have to be careful to come in and just be like, we're going to do this. You're going to listen to us. Here's how we're going to do it. that collaborative relationship is very
This is a
important.
collaboration.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
want to
And then
help
I had
you.
another one too. Consider your RBT's training. So have your RBTs ever been in a daycare? If they've only ever been at home, they might not know how to collaborate. They might not know how to not step on others' toes, things like that.
Yeah, sometimes you do get those RBTs who come in Glenn's blazing. Oh, he's my responsibility. He's my job. I get to make the decisions about Nick.
Yeah.
I went through my 40 hours of RBT training, and
Yeah.
you know, it's
Step
important
up.
to empower your RBTs so that they feel like they are the expert in the room, but at the
Yeah.
same time, they should be knowing that
Those
they need
soft
to
skills.
default to the people who are in charge, just as they would to a parent. They should be, it's very possible something was said on the first day, or even I've seen scenarios where someone comes in dressed in a certain outfit. Maybe the shorts are a little short and it gave everyone a bad impression. And now there's a poor attitude.
Absolutely.
Really prepping everyone before those services don't start on the first day. Services start way before.
I love that. Yep.
So how do you define at your organization, Sarah, what are the appropriate duties for RBTs? What are the appropriate duties for a daycare staff or a school staff?
And I think walking in and observing during that assessment as a BCBA, observing during that initial period where you walk in, you're looking around and seeing, what behavioral support does Nick need, and what can you do, and what we can ethically provide. So when we look at as an organization, making sure our staff understand what we were doing here at this daycare is no different than what you do at home, is no different than what you do in the clinic. It's all the exact same things. Empowering them to understand that you can't be peer pressured into doing these things, and it's okay to hold your boundaries, and making sure the RBTs know their company policies well too. Because I find that sometimes that handbook gets skimmed through a little bit and they legitimately don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And that it's very easy, to as an RBT, especially young, new, green RBT, somebody says like, oh, he needs to have his own toys. Oh, well, I have some toys in my car. I'll bring those in for him. Oh, well, Becky brings her own toys for him. And Susie's not bringing any toys at all. So like, why isn't Susie bringing in toys? It's
policies, like a cheat sheet, maybe a training review as a company, just making sure you come with those expectations and you're defining that role based off what an RBT is and what your client, Nick in this example, needs in this situation and what the daycare staff can do. Man, you can even make a flow chart. Daycare staff responsibilities, RBT responsibilities.
Exactly. So what if it were you and this was your RBT started telling you the situation? Let's pretend that you hadn't maybe had the pre-meetings that you were supposed to have. Based on the issues, what are some compromises that you might consider offering to the daycare to try to create a more positive working environment and build some rapport with the staff?
I think a step here after we secure Nick's safety and all of that, like I talked about, is getting the line of communication open with the staff to the BCBA. Because clearly the RBTs are overwhelmed. Nick's running away, they can't take data, they can barely do their session notes. I think they are dealing with enough. So getting that BCBA talking to that daycare staff as much as possible so the daycare staff can provide that feedback. Starting there, and then you might be able to get some of those compromises, whether it's offering time to do that session note after the session with Nick, so that way the RBT is not trying to do it during the session, or offering a compromise of, the RBT will help Nick transition to the bathroom and have him stand outside the bathroom and practice his waiting goal, and then the RBT will flag you down at that point. And maybe finding those compromises, figuring out what the daycare staff is struggling with, and just start there, solve their problems, and hopefully.
I love what you said about like the bathroom goal. Like we can help him transition to the bathroom. Maybe that's part of the issue, is he's really hard to get him to the bathroom.
Sounds like he's an eloper.
It sounds like, we got a runner. So maybe helping him transition to the bathroom, but making it clear that we are not going to be the ones wiping his bottom or be the only ones in the bathroom with him. Let us
Yeah.
show you how we transition him to the bathroom and then help
Yeah.
kind of transition that stimulus control from us to the staff. I think what you said about the data collection is really key. You know, I think it's hard sometimes for daycare staff to or just school staff in general to see us just sitting there either on a device or on a phone or even with the pen and paper writing notes. Making it clear, you know, hey, normally our staff take the last 10 minutes of session to do this, but let's just go for the full length of session and we'll pay her 10 minutes out of our own pockets to do this data collection after he leaves.
Yeah, and then like kind of follow up with that. If I were having that conversation, since we're pretending I'm in this situation, my next question would be if they're struggling so much where Nick can't be 10 minutes without his RBT, like they are just like absolutely not, like this cannot be happening. Is this really the right environment for Nick? Is he safe? Like, why are they struggling so much? And I'm not talking negatively about the daycare staff, but the environment. Like, what is going on where this RT can't even do their job? So again, stepping back and during that assessment period, and just looking at what is going on.
Well, if you have an eloper, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like Nick, okay, what's the layout of the classroom? Is the door open the whole
Yeah.
time? Is Nick the type of kid where the second he sees his RBT look down, he's up and out, running for that open door? Do we
Mm-hmm.
need to have the RBT do their note in front of the
Yeah.
door? You know,
Yeah.
so that they're,
That's a
you
good
know,
idea.
um, technically that kind of puts them still on, but it does provide kind of one extra line of defense for the daycare staff so that they can watch him. But if he does take off,
Yeah.
there's somebody sitting there.
Yeah, I
Um,
would definitely encourage to. Technically, RBPs should not be doing their session notes during session. This is
mhm,
technically not billable. So, considering as an organization or as a BCBA having that conversation of how can we get them doing this after the fact, or taking
yeah.
just some quick notes during session of what they would put in their note, and then a few minutes right after the end of that session, then
Yeah.
creating their note,
Well, and
things like
that's all
that.
defined by our payer and the 8-minute rule of, you know, is if it's less than
Exactly.
7 minutes, you know, doing the
Yeah.
note. But and then some payers do actually pay for that indirect time.
Yeah.
But it
So get that
maybe,
information. Yeah.
yeah, maybe a situation of knowing what your payer allows, and if it is coming down to have if their session notes are taking longer, or
Mhm.
and let's also look at how long are the RBTs taking to do these notes. You know, I've run into situations before where parents have reported me as, oh man, they're spending, you know, 25 minutes at the end of session writing notes. Well, that's kind of long. That's that's a long time to be writing session notes. And so maybe we need to be thinking about ways to improve our time and our speed in writing session notes. What are some things they can be writing
Yeah.
little notes throughout the day? And what is an appropriate time, and do we need to, if this is absolutely a situation where the daycare is standing strong, nope, she needs to be paying attention to him the entire time. There cannot be 1 minute where she is not looking at him. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's figure out a way to offer some non-billable time so that they can write their soap notes and
Yeah.
things after the billable time is over.
Absolutely.
So looking at this for you, Sarah, do you think that this is an appropriate environment to continue services in? Why or why not?
We would have to go in and support and see if we can keep Nick safe. If he's safe, we can work on it and he's feeling loved. Maybe once we have this meeting and the daycare staff, they have a change of heart, as long as he's able to be cared for and his needs are being met and he can be with peers, and if he's mouthing things and we can compromise on the mouthing, then no big deal. I think this is a great environment for him to grow. And so I'm sure he has relationships already. It's a lot to pull a kid out of daycare. A lot of change is hard for a kiddo. So I would definitely try and do our best, but always consider it's Nick that's having to go through this at the end of the day.
Yeah, making sure we're always defining that responsibility to the client.
Yeah.
It's so lucky sometimes when we can get a daycare to agree to let us provide services there, because we've got built-in social goals that we can work on, and built-in kind of group instructions and following a routine and all of those things that are really important, especially as we start to get into school readiness. Daycare is a great way to get ready for kinder. However, if what's important in all of these environments is kind of those stakeholders being involved, to me. And if their version of this is, even after meetings, even after trying to intervene, you're in charge of Nick, we're not going to have anything to do with him, that's your issue. This is not an appropriate environment for him, because he's now part of a community that refuses to acknowledge him. And that's not right for him. And so maybe it is finding a new daycare, or maybe it is offering services later in the day when someone can be at home with him. But again, really important to not abandon a situation. Let's try everything. Let's come up with some compromises. Let's make it clear what services we're offering, what we can do, what we can't do. And where is that ethical gray area?
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you again for joining us for our ethics munch. You can always reach out to me, Meg Jones, Megan at AlohaABA.com with any questions. Sarah, can you plug your stuff one more time?
Yes, so I'm Sarah Ellenwine. I'm a BCBA. I'm the owner of Ascent Therapy ABA, and I have a YouTube channel called Your ABA Help.
Fantastic. When you fill out the form with your code words and any feedback you have for this presentation, you will receive a certificate from us. We are an ACE provider, and you will be able to get half an Ethics CEU. Please check out all of our other Ethics CEU videos, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.